Good evening, Greater New York City area. This is CMajor, your Greater New York City area podcast piano teacher. Thank you. Thank you so very much. But it's all about you. It's all about you. I hope you had a good week. I have so many things to tell you about. This week was so exciting. First of all, it was cold. It was really icy, very icy. But let's get started. If you are just now tuning into our Piano for Parents series for the first time, welcome. We're glad that you're here. And this really is the type of podcast you should be able to just jump into. I mean, the easy thing about teaching chords is that you can jump in at any time. And you don't have to think, oh, I missed too much. No, it's wherever you want to jump in, wherever you feel comfortable. You have your chord charts. And if you do have them, make sure you pull those out, pull out any charts that you have, pull out any books that you have that explain how to find chords on the piano, and you can start right in the middle. It's not something that you have to go step by step with, but if you happen to be going step by step, just know we are going in a very specific order, and it's just an order that I've learned to take my adult students through across time. You just learn as you go what they respond to and what they're willing to do and what they're able to do and things like that. And then, of course, in my studio lessons, I do provide song examples for each group of chords that I go through. But anyway, welcome to the podcast if you're listening for the very first time. It's going to be an interesting night. I feel like I have a lot to say. I feel very full with information that I want to share. And just know that we will get down to business and talk about the chords. We're talking about chord layouts tonight. I really want to make sure that I explain how to expand your chords so that you get a fuller sound at the piano. Now you're going to start sounding a little bit more, what they say, grown up, a little bit more full in your sound. So just hang on for that. But at the same time, this is not just a dry podcast about chords. I have other things that I want to talk about. So I'm going to give some shout outs tonight. We'll go into our chord layouts, talk about expanding your chords. I'm going to talk with you about my Valentine's Day and my date. Yes, that will be very humorous. I hope you find it funny when you hear my story. But at the same time, I just want to share and let you know what I'm doing here in the Greater New York City area. So I love New York. I love being in this area, and I don't mind sharing. Also, we're going to be talking with parents about some programming ideas, and I'm going to mention a little bit about the Grammys as well, because I was able to talk with one of my piano parents about that. But I just like giving ideas to any parents that may be listening, what to do with your child here in New York if you're thinking about taking them out to experience certain programming. I just want to introduce you to something that will work in the New York City area. So the CMajor radio show is also going to be coming up a little bit later on tonight, so tune in for that. I'm going to say more about what we have planned for that later on tonight. And then I'll just say some closing words. That'll be pretty much the show. But try to hang with me. And if I feel like it, and I may even just stop the program to have you listen to some background music while I make myself a cup of coffee. So if you happen to have your coffee ready and good, and you're ready to go and you're good to go, that's great. Right now I'm just sitting here looking at a glass of water just in case I need to take a sip. But I'm feeling the urge to make myself a cup of coffee. So just hang in for that. I might be doing that in a few moments. But I want to start off tonight with shout-outs. It was the first thing that came to mind, and as I was writing out my notes for tonight's podcast episode, I thought, what should I talk about first? So at the forefront of my mind tonight is a shout-out for the Associated Board of Royal Schools of Music, and I'll tell you why. It was because I had a conversation with a colleague earlier this week. Actually, it was later on in the week, but I'll just say earlier this week because it did take place this week, and we were just talking about the many changes that are going on. But I'm really excited about the things that ABRSM is offering to students. They're making it so much easier for students to do well in music theory. They've come up with a new app. If you have a chance, check it out over there. And I'm currently advising students to use some of the ABRSM apps. I'll just say it that way. And it's been very, very helpful. So shout out to ABRSM. Just remarkable. Shout out. It's just great to know here in the 21st century we have such great options for great students and parents that want to have their children go in that direction. And I'm just so glad that I'm able to be a part of it. So I'm excited about that. The next shout out is also to a very important organization, which you may or may not have heard of, but it's very important to parents. So parents, if you are looking for a teacher in the greater New York City area and within a certain mile radius of where you are staying, I would just urge you to take a look at the Music Teachers National Association website, because they have a way for you to locate teachers in your area that are certified. That's so important when it comes to picking a teacher for your child, someone who has lots of years of piano teaching experience. And for the most part, they really need to be certified if you expect your child to learn in a certain way. Now, having said all of that, I will say that from personal experience, I have talked with parents who want both. And of course, there are organizations that are local that make sure that the piano teachers that are sent out in the community, that they are prepared to address issues and you have a good teacher. So if that's a concern, then definitely look into MTNA. That's the name of the organization. And good luck with that, and let me know how you do with that. But big shout out to MTNA. I can say a little bit more about MTNA from personal experience, from my earlier life, say it that way. But I'm going to reserve those comments for another podcast episode. And then I want to give a shout out to Starbucks. I really grappled with the idea of even saying Starbucks on my podcast episode today, because I don't want it to appear as if I'm using Starbucks to get listeners. It's not like that. Everybody who knows me knows my love for Starbucks. And I just have to give a shout out to Starbucks, because I had the most amazing Starbucks experience this week. And it was courtesy of some friends that love me, and they gave me a Valentine's Day gift. And I just can't be more grateful. I was able to experience the new roastery, and if I have a chance, I'll share a little bit more. After we get all of our Chord business out of the way, I'll share a little bit more about what I actually did when I was at the Starbucks roastery in New York. But big shout out to Starbucks for that. So pleasantly surprised. I mean, coffee and music really do go together for me in my life. And so I was just really surprised, because I thought I was going to have to go to Italy in order to experience that level of coffee experience. And so it was just nice to know that it was just a short trip to New York that did it. Big shout out to the New York Philharmonic. Big shout out. have so many good things to say about the New York Phil. And the reason why I'm shouting them out is because also I was invited and just was able to attend a rehearsal there, and it just really made my day. So big shout out to the New York Phil. Now, I want to give some shout outs to students who are busy composing and arranging their own piano songs and arranging other songs that they're working on to suit their own tastes. So big shout out to those students. Also, shout out to my students who are learning to play by chords and by ear. And most of those students are adults. I do have a student who's a preteen who's very into it because he wants to learn to play chords while he is singing. So he wants to learn to play chords so that when he accompanies himself, that he's playing the supporting harmony so that he can just focus on melody and the other things that he's doing with his voice. So big shout out to that student. Very good. Also, I have a shout out for my students that are learning the difference between adagio and allegro. I have a few of those students right now. Some of them are young and some of those students are a little bit older, but it's so fun to teach that. I really enjoy just sharing with them the performance directions and at the same time just the difference between the two. So students learning adagio and allegro, shout out to you all. Yes. Now, let's get into our chord layouts discussion. You're going to like this because if you have been following the podcast, you know we've talked about C, we've talked about F, we've talked about G, we've talked about D, we talked about E, we talked about A. We talked about minor chords, how to make them all minor. And we've been mainly covering these chords in the form of triads, so 3-note chords. But for the first time, we're really going to talk about how to lay out all of these chords. Now that I'm thinking about it, I might have mentioned it in a previous podcast. I might have. I will have to go back and just double check. But I want to make sure you do it while you have your chord charts in front of you. So if you can, get out your trusty chord chart and just take a look with me. And then if I need to go to the textbook, I will. Okay, so this is what you're going to be taking a look at. So if you have your ultimate keyboard chord chart, by the way, if you're just joining us in tonight's podcast for the first time, just know that we have a syllabus available for you to follow. So if you want to follow the syllabus, you can. So this is going to be a little bit tricky because a lot of these chord charts only give you the area of the chord itself. It doesn't really show the other outside range of that chord, if you know what I mean. They'll show a little bit, but it looks like it's not balanced. So that's giving me an idea if I ever had the need to develop my own chord chart, or if someone invited me to make up my own chord chart and then make it for sale, then I guess I have something to say about the design. But let's just use what we have. Okay, so here in the Ultimate Keyboard Chord Chart, it features 120 most commonly used chords. You have diagrams, there's chord theory. They give you an introduction to talk with you about the chords and how chords are formed. But let's just go with what we have. So we haven't talked about inversions at all. We haven't. But we may get a little bit into that tonight. I'll just mention it as an aside. But the first chord that I see on this chart is C major. So it's in our left column. And you should see C major. Actually, the left column says major. And then the middle column has a big C. And then underneath that, you see C, E, G. Now, to expand that chord, you can play C, E, G, and then just add another C at the top. So, basically what we're doing, we're doubling. If you want to use that word, that's a little bit more fancy term for anyone that's into music theory. C, E, G, and then add a C on the top. So you can write in your own letter C if you want. So that's our first expansion. This is very exciting, by the way, because once we get into 7 chords, I'll show you how to expand those, and then we'll talk about how to play rhythms. So we'll talk about major 7s, we'll talk about minor 7th chords, we'll talk about 7 chords, how to expand those. Not sure yet if we're going to make it to diminished and augmented and 9th chords yet, but we'll see. We'll do what we can in the first quarter of the Piano for Parents series. Okay, so that's the first expansion. Now let's go over to F. So F is going to be on the 5th page, and then here you can see that again, it's more of a centered chord, a centered triad, F-A-C. But go ahead and write in another letter if you can with pencil. Just pencil it in and write in an F above that C so that you're playing F-A-C-F. So we haven't talked about fingering at all. We haven't. And there's a good reason for that. I just really want to leave the fingering up to you until we get a little bit more strict about the fingering. Now, when I was working with my adult student today at the lesson studio, I was a little bit more strict with him because I wanted to show him what we were going to be doing in the future. So you need to place your hands on the piano a certain way so that when we get ready to do other things, you've already rehearsed this hand position. Now, the other thing I want to caution you about, too, if you feel any discomfort at all when you're expanding, because what that means is you will have to do a finger stretch. And since you haven't developed proper technique yet, you may feel a little bit of a stretch. Just like anything, if you're stretching something for the first time, you may feel some discomfort. But whatever you do, don't do what Robert Schumann did. Did you hear about him? I believe New York's classical station is talking about this mechanism that he built to make his hands stronger, and more specifically the 4th finger. Anyway, I don't want to get into it, but if you care to look it up, look up the story of Robert Schumann. I may say a little bit more about that later on in the podcast, but Schumann is spelled S-C-H-U-M-A-N-N, Schumann. But we're talking about the stretch. Do not overstretch your fingers, whatever you do. You should not feel any pain at the piano. But if you decide to, you can divide some of these keys and just cover part of what you're supposed to play with the left hand and the other part with the right hand. So I do have some ideas for positioning, but I'm just going to reserve that for the moment. Okay, now let's go over to G. So again, this chord, this triad is centered, so then we'll just expand just based on what I have in front of me. So expand to G, expand GBD to GBD, G. And just pencil that in. Okay, now let's go back using the same chord chart. And now we're going to expand D major. So find D major. If you're with me, and this particular chord chart is on page 4. And so just play D, F sharp, A, and then D. Next, let's go to E. And you can write all this down. Let's say you can, C major, I don't have my chart in front of me. I can't do this right now. Okay, fine. Just see if you can play the podcast back. We have download on demand. Feel free to do that. or just write down the letters and then look it up later. I have no problem with that. And I'm sure you're going to be fine. It should be fun. Okay, now let's go to E major. So E, G sharp, B, and then just put an E on top. Okay, and then A. A, C sharp, E, and then put an A on top. Okay, so I hope you get the idea. Again, if I had a picture that gave me more space to work with, then I would expand the chords differently. But let's just take a look at my other source. And I'm pulling these out one by one, by the way. Okay, let me just take a quick break. I'm going to take a sip of water. And then we're going to come back and then we're going to talk about the chords, the way they're pictured in the piano chord dictionary, and see what we can expand there. Okay, so back in a moment. Okay, and you're here on C Major Before the Show. Thank you so much for tuning in to tonight's episode. Are you excited? I hope so. I'm excited. You know, I just wasn't sure how excited I would be over chords, but I really am excited about chords. I get more excited as we go along because this is exciting for you. It really is all about you and your learning. It's really not about me. I didn't learn to play the piano in this way, but I'm so excited to share this with you because I found over the years, just basically doing loose research, just loose qualitative research, which I'll talk about that in a moment. And it's basically a social experiment, an informal one. And it's just so exciting to see how many students get excited about chords. It really is. So I'm with you. So now let's go to Piano Chord Dictionary. It's a handy guide. And now we're going to take a look at and it's in ABC order, which I like about this book. And again, the thing that threw me off about the book was that everything was pictured in the bass clef. I'm like, really? But there's a reason for that. Okay, so if we go to the C major chord here. So let's say if you didn't know what you were doing and some salesperson came along and said, oh, you're looking for a chord book? Oh, get this one. There's a nice picture on the front. It has a red at the top, green at the bottom. Yeah, get this one. $5.99. And then they ring you up. But then you get the book home, you go, what in the world? Why is the C chord spelled this way? It doesn't look like the other chord spellings from my other charts and books. What do I do with this? GCE 521. Yes, I'm making fun right now because sometimes that's how it happens, and then you become really discouraged, and then you go, okay, that's it, I need a piano teacher. But just imagine you were trying to expand your chords by using this book. Actually, I like it because it gives you the option to expand based on inversions, okay? So now I have to do what I said I wasn't going to do and then talk about inversions for a second. So let's close this for a second. Let's go back to the Ultimate Keyboard chart because they do a great job of breaking it down for you. So inside the Ultimate Keyboard chord chart, they say playing chords and inversion. And then what they do is refer to the chart that they have on the page. It has 4 columns: chord type, formula, note names, chord names. And then below that, playing chords and inversion. The information above tells you how chords are built in theory, but this is not necessarily how chords are played. So true, which is why I love this other book, the Piano Chord Dictionary, because they're giving you experience of how to play the chords. Their argument is that this is the notation, the fingering, and the keyboard diagrams for all of the important chords used in popular music, and that you are going to be playing this because it's particularly useful in playing rhythmic accompaniments, and it shows you how to play that as pictured. Okay, so we're using both of these together, but let's go on to see what they have to say. So you are not likely to voice chords on the keyboard in simple ascending stacks of thirds. The chord tones may be spread out, doubled, or missed altogether. See, we're talking about doubling. The chords may be played by one hand or both hands. That's true. In other words, you will want to feel free to make liberal use of chord inversions. Let me read that sentence again. That's such an important sentence. You will want to feel free to make liberal use of chord inversions. So don't let anyone ever tell you you have to play a chord a certain way. You just don't have to do anything. You have to do what sounds good to your ear, and in the words of somebody very famous, if it sounds good, it is good. An inversion is a chord with a note other than its root on the bottom. That's the way they explain inversion. First inversion has the third on the bottom. Second inversion has the fifth on the bottom. So just study this if you can, but what I'm going to do now is just give you a chord expansion that uses an inversion, something other than the root on the bottom, and then you're just going to double what's there. Basically, in this case, you're going to double the fifth. So if this is too much technical talk for you, then see me offline. I'll be happy to explain it to you, or get with a music professional to explain it to you. So that's going to be an interesting sound for you, and tell me if you like it or not. But it's just about knowing what you're doing at the piano. So try it. Basically what they did was they gave you GCE. So to expand that, then you would just play GCE G. And then you can figure out the fingering. So now you're doubling the fifth. And just see how you like that. If you can live with that, if you go, well, C major, I don't really like what you did, that's fine. One thing we haven't talked about right now is minor chords. But you would do the same thing. You follow the same idea. You would just play, for instance, if you're playing a C minor chord in root position as a triad, then you would play C, E flat, G, and then just put the C on the top. And that's what we've done so far. And then other inversions follow suit. Okay, so that's just one example. I'm just going to start with C because I really want to get to the other charts. Okay, so just know that's what you're up against if you do that. If you decide to go with that particular chart. Okay, now let me pull out the one that my students are in love with. They really are in love with this plastic chord chart. And I had a student that bought one, but then he hid it from me. He just didn't want me to ask him to learn all of those chords. I think he got a little bit scared, but it really was supposed to be in all fun and not to scare him away. But I love all of my students. My students are just amazing individuals, and they really keep me going. So let's see. Here we have the same choice. Now this is an even smaller coverage here. So this is the piano chord charts with the red dots. So you can't miss it. I think it must be the only chord chart that you can find, mini chart, that has red dots. No fingering, nothing. Just columns that tell you what you're looking at from top to bottom. So major, minor, seventh, augmented, diminished, and then key to the far left. And then they give you, at the very top, a longer keyboard to look at, but the keyboards on the chart itself are shorter keyboards. So then let's go down to, it's also an ABC order, so let's go to C. So that's the first thing you see, the first dot you see. You see 1, 2, C is there, and then 1, 2, E is there, 1, 2, 3, G is there. So dot, dot, dot. So I would just say put a dot on the upper C. So 1, 2, C is there. So now you have a 4-note chord. So if you look over in the column where it says sevenths, you'll go, wait, there's some 4-note chords over there. Can I just play those C major? You can, but right now we're not over there. We're over here where it says major. So C major, and then dot, 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 and then you're adding in your own imaginary dot, or just penciling it in, or making your red dot and just sticking it on there so you know what to play when you get to the keyboard. So I'm going to assign this, by the way, as homework over at CMajor's classroom. So meet me over there a little bit later because I will be telling you what I'd like to see you work on over at CMajor's classroom for homework. And that's our homework sound. By the way, do you like the sound effects? Let me know if you do. If you don't like them, we'll stop doing them, but I just think it adds more of a dimension to the podcast, and hopefully it's something that gets your attention. That's really what we're aiming for. So as we did in the first chart, I want you to find C, I want you to find F, I want you to find G, expand it all on your own, and then go to the minors. Okay, so now let's take a look at another chart and just see where we are. And while I'm looking for that chart to pull that out, I also want to give you the chance to work with your key stickers if you need to. You can use these with all keyboards. And I just have to tell you, I have one student who had the cutest little stickers. Now, they were not these stickers. They were other stickers that they found online, color-coordinated stickers. And it was just great. And they are working with a keyboard, so we were able to put all the stickers on the keyboard and then just play everything by color. So remember during the summer we talked about color? Playing by color. So we'll get back to that topic in another time. But if you have the key stickers, go ahead and put those on if you need to. Make sure they're the ones that are reusable, that you can just peel off and then apply again as needed. But this would be good too for working with your chord expansions. Okay, so now I'm really going to pull out my other chart. Thought it was right here. Let's see. Okay, so you know what? I don't have it available right now, so now I'm just going to look in my guide. And while I'm looking for the topic in my guide, I do have a story to share about a student this week who is excited about scales. Can you believe that? So I will be shouting her out in the near future, but she really is excited about scales. Just a remarkable story because she's I guess what you would label as, if you were to apply a label, you would say she's a kinesthetic learner. She needs to learn everything by movement. She needs to see it done first and then just copy. She can do it immediately. So I was able to, believe it or not, this is a student who's been with me for less than a year. I was able to show her how to play a Mozart sonatina because it happened to have a lot of scales in it, and she did it right away. So we'll talk about scales in the future because I do want to cover why we're not covering scales. I think it's important to talk about what we're not talking about. So in this case, we're covering chords, but we're not talking about scales. And then I'll have something to say about why we're not doing that. Okay, so let's go to, I'm trying to find this page that's talking about chords. Oh, here we are. Triads and chords. So let's go over to that page. So this will be important a little bit later on for the C Major radio show if you happen to be tuning in there. I just wanted to go to that page where it talks about expanding chords. So I got the idea from this book because it shows you layouts. And what else came to mind was, wouldn't it be fun to have a mathematician present who could tell you the different combinations you can get from one triad? So the tonic triad of C major can produce all of these chords and then just give you a picture. So what are the possibilities? Is it really just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 possibilities? I think it has to be more than that. So in either way, they all consist of the notes C, E, and G. So they give you an example, and we're going to talk about how to write this down on a staff a little bit later on tonight. We started that discussion last week on the C Major radio show, but I wanted to continue that discussion when it comes to writing down music clearly. So if you have an interest in that, see me over there for that. It's going to be really, really interesting, and I'll see how much time I can spend tonight on that topic. Also, just want to mention too, if you ever decide you want to chat live with me here on this podcast, just let me know. We can arrange that ahead of time. And then if you'd like to call in to the C Major radio show, let me know about that too. It really would be nice if you would let me know ahead of time. And so I can plan for that and we'll have a good conversation over coffee. Coffee and music. Okay, so here you see C, E, G, C, the same way I was saying it. So it's divided between the bass staff and the treble staff. So they have it diagrammed here on the grand staff as well. So it really is about repositioning. That's what I was trying to lead you toward. And so what I'll do is just post the idea of that over on C Major's classroom at wordpress.com. We're still building our page over there, so just be sure to look out for that. Okay, and that's pretty much our discussion for chord expansion. So I hope you learned something today about chord layouts. Please let me know if you did. I think that this is a good thing if you can start expanding your chords that would be a great thing. It's going to help your sound and just help you to sound fuller. If you have some ideas about how you would like to expand your chords yourself, just let us know. You can get in touch with us on social media at CMajor Porter 1. And we are celebrating 25 followers over at Twitter. I'm excited about that. I'm very excited about that. That just means that we're growing. And I was able to also tap into a webinar this week that gave us ideas of how to expand our page. So we're building over there. Very exciting stuff. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to come back now. I'm going to talk to you about my Valentine's date and my day that's coming up in a few moments. I'm going to stop now and make myself a cup of coffee, and I'm going to eat a little bit of a snack and just come on back in a few moments. But you can do the same. If you happen to be in a position where you can fire up your coffee pot, then feel free to do that. Make your own best cup of coffee. What I do, I cheat a little bit. And by cheating, I don't mean it in a bad way, but I do not have a K-cup maker. I don't have a K-cup maker. I have a regular coffee pot, but I use the K-cups. And I take the K-cups and I open it up and I just pour the coffee that's in there into my regular filter, and then I brew the coffee. So there you go, 1 cup at a time. But as one of my friends explained to me, they said, well, what if I want to make 10 cups of coffee? I was like, okay, then you just blew my whole idea of doing that. But if you're just brewing 1 cup of coffee at a time, that's how I do it. So I get the perfect cup because I don't like measuring with a teaspoon. So anyway, I'm going to do that now, and I'll be back in a moment. So here's some music to listen to, and I'll be right back. Okay, we are back here on CMajor before the show. I know you heard all of that in the background, me making the coffee and the coffee pot brewing and so forth. So I'm going to be extremely rude right now. And I'm going to be slurping my coffee and I'm going to be eating my snack. And I invite you to do the same. So we'll do it together. Okay, so those are the types of sounds you're going to be hearing me make as I tell you my Valentine's Day story. So I just turned down my music here. And so I know I was teasing you during the week. I did a promo and I said, "What's up, New York? This is your piano teacher, CMajor." And I hope you weren't offended by that. I don't mean I'm the only piano teacher in New York. Of course, I didn't mean that. What I meant was, you know, I'm a piano teacher living in this area, and I'm getting to meet some really great people. I've had a slow start. I haven't had the best direction and the best guidance, to be honest, when it comes to mapping out my career. But I've had top education, and to me that made all the difference. I got to meet some really great people. I'm still learning how to network. And so there are a lot of great teachers around. Some of them are my friends. And I just want to be the best piano teacher I can be, and to be able to share that on a podcast is just so exciting. It feels like a privilege, really. It does. It feels like an honor to really get to share with you some information and then get feedback. So we wanted to do more of that. So that was why I said that. I was a little overzealous, I think, in saying this is your piano teacher, C major, but I really meant it that in a friendly way. So it happened to be very icy outside this week because it snowed. It really did. And I did have a date, but I over exaggerated the date, meaning that it wasn't a date with an actual person. It was actually a rehearsal date. Okay, so I just kept saying to my friends that I had a date, and it turned out that it was a rehearsal date. Okay, so I'll be playing that laugh track a lot as I'm telling this story. But it was the details of my Valentine's Day date, and then when I showed my friends the pictures, they go, well, did you go by yourself? And yes, I was by myself. But my friends were the one that actually set me up on the date, and they made it possible for me to afford to go to New York to visit the roastery, which has only been open for about 6 weeks, I just learned. So I had such great fun there. Let me just pull up my paperwork from the roastery. And it was so exciting to be there. And I have some pictures I did share with my friends. And by the way, if you are my Facebook friend, you know I have a private page. And basically it's, just to share a little video of some of the things that I did while I was at the roastery. But if you are a huge fan of Starbucks, as I am, and you are excited about coffee culture and coffee and music going together, as I am, then you have to visit this roastery. You just have to. And really, Starbucks is not paying me to say all of this. It's not even like that. It's just I've had genuine excitement for Starbucks for a very long time. And it feels like I always will. And I thought I was going to have to go to Italy to experience this roastery, but it turns out there's one in New York. So it was just very exciting. So that's how my Valentine's Day started. It started with the best coffee, compliments of my friends that I could have possibly had. And then I learned from a friend today that one of her friends actually works there. And I was like, why didn't you tell me that before I went there? But it was okay. So the Starbucks Reserve Roastery, if you have a chance to, if you're serious about coffee, you're serious about music, you're serious about making Starbucks the third place, as I am, I really hope I can make that happen one day. You've got to go. You've got to go. And just, it's the best cup of coffee I've ever had. The best cup of coffee I've ever had in my entire life. I took one sip and I just thought, OMG. And then the music was playing in the background. I couldn't even really hear the music at that point. I just was so absorbed by the coffee. But the music was great. The vibe was great. And I just really recommend going. So that's how my day started out. I met some really great people. And I got to experience the bakery. And I got to experience the coffee bar. But I did not get to experience the bar where they actually have cocktails. So if you're into that, then definitely check it out. It's, I believe in what they call the Meatpacking District. All I know is 14th and 9th. So if you happen to be in New York and you take the E train from Port Authority and just head down, that's the World Trade Center train, but just head down to 14th Street, get off of that stop, and literally walk like a block. It's about 800 feet. And you just walk to 9th Avenue, and you're there. And it's a really remarkable experience. So that's how my Valentine's Day started. And I couldn't have had a better start to my day. It was just really, really great. And then, to top it all off, I got to go to this rehearsal. Also, compliments of my friends. And it was an experience to really just take in. And I met some really great people at this rehearsal. Like we had a really great conversation because this lady sat in front of me. She was a patron, a friend of the Philharmonic, and she sat in front of me and she was so concerned about the direction of music making and how it's going with this generation and how she should inform her son's parents, her grandson's parents, how to raise him, as far as piano lessons go. She said, what should I do? I really want my grandson to be cultured and to really understand the value of music making. And so we had this really great conversation about Beethoven. We had a really great conversation about pianos, and we talked about Robert Schumann, and then we talked about, piano lessons. So that was my Valentine's Day date. I'm really in love with my Valentine's Day this year, 2019. So thank you for listening to my story. I'm not that great at telling stories, but it really was good. It really was good. So I'm just excited about that. And then now I have some information that I want to share with you from the Philharmonic, because I promised I was going to talk about parents and programming. And the reason I'm talking about this is because I've had a couple of parents who say to me over the years, what should I do to get my child into music making? So if you know anything at all, you're a piano teacher, you know anything about young children, they love to go fast, they love to go slow. They love to see you go slow, they love to see you go fast. They just love fast and slow, especially the really young ones. So that's something they can understand. And then if you could just introduce them to the whole idea of that, when it comes to young people's concerts, I would just invite you to take a look into that if you are a parent. So there's a whole article in the bulletin that talks about this, and it has to do with something called the Philharmonic Playground. So if you're a parent, you're listening to this, it does explore the difference between allegro and adagio. And so they explain the whole program. It just sounds really, really wonderful. And of course, they have the right guidance when it comes to music education and the graduate students that are involved with that program. So if you can, take a look at that. I'm going to be sharing this information with the parents who have inquired about things they can do with their children and to get them into something like this. I think is very important. Now, when we're talking about parents and programming, I also had a very important conversation with a parent this week about the Grammys. So here she was watching the Grammys while her daughter was sitting there writing an essay. And I thought it was just the funniest story. It really was. So she was telling me, oh, yeah, and Camila Cabello was on stage, and then she was singing Havana, the same song that my daughter is working on with you. And I thought, and the daughter was like, Mom, you watched the Grammys without me? So then, of course, they talked about watching the replay. But to have a parent that was really into music making and really wanted to understand what goes on with music's biggest night, and at the same time, she wanted to censor some of the things that her daughter would see, in the performances, so I can understand that. But they really are supporting her music making, and that was really, really great. So it's not really a shout out, but I just really want to applaud that parent. So that's pretty much it. That's today's show. I hope you learned something today about chord layouts and how to expand your chords. We will continue this conversation over at the CMajor radio show, so look out for that later on tonight. And what I plan to do is also write a description of tonight's show. And I'm not sure how long I'm going to go on over there. It may be an hour, it may be a little bit less. I'm really trying to just take baby steps over there until I'm really, really ready to expand. But the Piano for Parents series continues over at the CMajor radio show. That's why we call this show CMajor before the show, because it's before you get to that show, that podcast experience over there. So tune in if you can. I'm going to be writing a description of tonight's episode, which will deal with chord layouts, but within the context of writing down music clearly. And then I invite you to tune in next week for Royal 7th Chord. You don't want to miss that. What's that about? You don't want to miss it because it involves, what I'm trying to do is a combination of topics. In next week's episode, I'm covering the music of Prince, one of my most favorite pop artists and artists of all times, without giving him a label. But I'm more interested in how he used 7th chords in his writing. And then as you are learning 7th chords with me on this series, that you'll be able to find these chords in the music that excites you the most. So the music that excites me the most in this regard would be the music of Prince. And I'm going to be taking a look at some of the music now. Just to caution you, I will not be playing any examples, no audio examples. I don't want any copyright issues or anything like that. But I will give you titles of songs, and I'll just point to where the 7 chords are and maybe how they line up with the words. I haven't really decided yet, but it's a work in progress. But that's our plan. That's our aim for next week. So I'm very happy to give you a preview of what we'll talk about. Also, it goes along with the subject of Black History Month, which we're all talking about this month as well. So I'll say a little more about that during the week for the promo, and then we'll just jump right in and talk about that on next Saturday night. So thank you so much for being here. I want you to promise me that you're going to make the best music you can make. Promise me you're going to have fun at the piano. And if you are a parent who's learning piano for the first time, just do your very best. You're setting the example for your child, and that's going to make all the difference in the world. So thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for listening. And I will see you next time right here on CMajor before the show. Take care.